Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from the back of the classroom. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. We've got a good episode ahead of you. A lot of F1 off-season talk, different discussions. Of course, Magic the Gathering, a little bit of League of Legends rosters and some changes or things staying the same. But Justin, it's good to see you. How's your week been?
Yeah, good to see you too. In some ways, it feels like we're back at it again, and in some ways, to be fair, it feels like I haven't seen you in forever. So right back at you. It is good to see your smiling face. I'm looking forward to seeing the little puppy after the show. But yeah, man, it's been a pretty good week. Got some stuff to throw at you, but why don't you start us off here for the Rose, Thorn, and Seed? I want to hear about your week first.
Cool. So I guess before I get fully to my Rose, Thorn, and Seed, my week so far has been very mixed and interesting. Of course, like you said, got the puppy, so I'm looking forward to showing her off. Her name is Senna, named after Ayrton Senna and the League of Legends character Lucian's wife.
I feel like you were very generous with me. Like, I was totally memeing.
Oh no, it was like so I'll tell you how the name like first came out, and it was not from me. It was actually Colleen. Okay. So she's like, for a while had been thinking of like, oh, when we get a puppy, before we even knew we were gonna get Senna this soon. And she's like, just had a list of ongoing list of names she liked on her phone, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so the name Senna had come up because one of the previous bachelors was like afterwards got married, and he has two kids, and their names are Lux and Senna. And so she's like, oh, I really like the name Senna. And I'm like, oh, that guy must be a total League of Legends dork, like naming his kids after two League of Legends characters. And I don't know if that's actually, but it would be an odd coincidence if he hadn't, for those both to be like his kids' names. I think it would be too weird of a coincidence for him to not play League. So I was like, yeah, I'd like the name. It's like League of Legends character, F1 driver. I'm like, that works. And the longer and longer we got on and closer, we started narrowing down names, and that's the one that we just kind of liked the most and went with it. So for me, it does have that League of Legends and the F1 kind of in it, which is cool. But for Colleen, she just liked the name.
Sure. But yeah, you were definitely being generous, as though like that was the reason you handpicked the name. Like, oh, we love this, so we're gonna put it on our dog. Yeah, no, it was it was a combination of things, but sure. those definitely I think that's beautiful. Came into play. But yeah, so that was great. Thanksgiving week, of course, as well. So spending time with family. At work, I've been kind of doing a little bit of everything. I got to talk to my conspiracy theory resident, who is just always on his conspiracy theory shit, and I get one of our 25-pound plates for the Smith machine at the gym has gone missing, and so this guy is like on the case. He's like, remember when those 10-pound dumbbells went missing a while ago and you guys had to get new ones? I bet it's the same person. I bet they stole a single 25-pound plate. And I'm like, I don't know where it went, but I'm like, it doesn't seem as sinister to me as he's like, oh, I know it's got to be the same person. They are fucking with the gym. And I'm like, I don't know, man, but I'll try and get it replaced pretty quick here, kind of thing. I was fixing treadmills, so yeah, my week has been a bit all over the place.
Yeah, that guy, he's a character. Like I don't.
Dude, at least he cares about the space that he lives in. Maybe to an nth degree,
He
but you know.
crosses some lines. We had to send him an email recently about like basically like a lease violation about harassing other residents because he was like he makes fun of this one woman she's wearing a face shield and mask still, like whenever she's entering and exiting the building, and like
Gotcha.
will wait, like if multiple people are waiting for the elevator, she'll like wait and take a one on her own, like
Mm-hmm.
but she's cool about it. She like lets other people go first. She's not like,
Sure.
but he like was yelling like hazmat suit at her from his balcony at her in the parking lot, and like
No.
yeah, so he doesn't have much of a filter, and he's a
Gotcha.
little loony, so it's always entertaining. I don't mind talking with him, but sometimes you just gotta walk away and kind of leave the conversations. So
Like as a joke, like kind of removed from the scenario, yelling hazmat suit at somebody, just like calling them an inanimate object is hilarious. But
oh,
like
but
that's
he's like
so
gone.
mean.
And he's gone past it to where he's like, I'm gonna get you a hazmat suit for Christmas, and like just every time he sees her, just making comments, and we're like, dude,
Oh,
like you're making her uncomfortable and
yeah,
unhappy.
that's
Like
not
you
cool.
gotta, like you can't be doing this shit, man.
Like in the privacy with your friends, like whatever your beliefs may be, like that's fine. You
Right,
can
like
joke, but
keep
dude,
joke with your friends.
don't be yelling it at this lady. That
Don't
is
say it
like
to her. Just if
horrid.
you're like talking to your work friends or whatever, and you're like, "Yo, there's this lady who I think is nuts at the bell," and like, and I've talked to him about it too, and because I have to keep a straight face, and I'm like, this is just
Sure,
wild, but I'm like,
sure,
I just basically am like, hey, it doesn't affect you at all, so you just got to kind of let it go and just let her do her thing. I'm like, I don't know her situation, you don't know her situation. Maybe there's a reason medically or something that she's doing. And I try to play devil's advocate to make him like kind of
sure.
think about his words, but yeah, he's continued to be quite the character. But
Brutal.
uh, but for the rose for my crazy week, it is not talking to the conspiracy theory guy. It is getting Senna and starting to like raise her and train her and have her here. She's adjusted pretty well. She's very. This is tonight will be, I guess, our like fourth or fifth night having her
Okay.
here, and she has like consistently slept longer and longer each night, and she's like almost making it through a full night's sleep at this point,
Nice.
without us having to wake up and take her out and all. She's had no accidents in her crate. She has in the apartment here and there, but she's a baby and a
Sure.
puppy, and like that's just what they do. But she's like
Mm-hmm.
starting to figure it out. But she's kind of gone from being this like shy little, just like cuddly dog that wants to just snuggle with you 24/7 to like very 50-50 on like snuggling, and then just being an absolute maniac, like zooming around the apartment and biting anything she can. She only barks at me. She doesn't bark at anything. But when she wants to play and I like get down and like start moving around and like playing with her, that's the only time she barks. She goes nuts at me when when I do that. So it's been fun. So it's a nice rose for this week.
Nice.
But my thorn, I'm still having some ailments. My stomach issues I was talking about last week. It went away. It seemed like it was just, I don't know, maybe had eaten something that just like messed with me for a bit or whatnot. But now this week I've had like consistent headaches the past 3 days or so, where it's like I'll get the headache, I take Tylenol, it goes away, Tylenol wears off, headache's back, like, and I'm not really doing anything different. I'm trying to be even more conscious about like drinking water and doing things like that to avoid it, but nothing has quite seem to fix it permanently or more long term. So that's been a little frustrating, but they haven't been. I've only had one time where I was like, oh, I think this is gonna like become a migraine. I was trying to let it like just ride it out and not take Tylenol because I don't want to just do that all the time.
Sure.
But it got to the point where I'm like, oh, this is going to become a migraine. Like I can feel when it's like right on the edge of turning into a more terrible headache, I guess. So I like took Tylenol then. But yeah, it's just been this kind of consistent thing, and I just hope again that nothing's more seriously wrong. But because I don't want to go to the doctor and deal with that, but.
Hopefully the guy that stole the 10-pound weight and the 25-pound weight is not sabotaging you in any way.
I hope not. I mean, I do fill up my water bottle in the fitness center at work, so maybe there's like a cyanide drip or something that before long I'm gonna be like the guy from Princess Bride who drinks his poison a little bit every day to build up a tolerance. So
oh yeah.
So maybe that'll be me before too long. But yeah, definitely not ideal. And then my seed is it's work related, but I have my yearly set. They have us do self-evaluations as opposed to like a standard review, which I don't hate, but I also don't love because it's just like feels weird kind of going and like writing about how I think I did at my job. But it like I guess the seed part of it is looking critically and everything at kind of what I was looking to do since I came into the role until now, and kind of thinking forward to the coming year and what goals and whatnot I want to like set for myself. It's kind of nice because it helped me reframe and do a little bit of like kind of plan setting for how I want to get to reach those goals for the coming year and things like that, which I think will, if I can do them, will make it easier to do my job. And then also just like I will be just kind of happier, I think, if I can get some of those things like organized and everything for the coming year. So
Gotcha. Yeah, the excuse me. So it's just a self-review. That's kind of odd. I'm curious why, like, if the primary thing is like doing a self-review for the end of the year, I would kind of want them to do it too. So then you could just kind of like compare notes and then be like, oh, okay, well, what elements do you think achieved me this like rating, score, idea, whatever? And then like, let's talk about where those differences came from. Like, oh, like, see, like my expectations were this. You were kind of thinking the role was supposed to like, oh, okay, well, moving forward, then I feel like it's easier to have a conversation than like,
I like
build
that
on performance,
better. Like
you know?
the comparing notes like thing, I think I would like more than. So basically I do the self-evaluation and then I give it to them and then we sit down and like look at what I answered basically and I get feedback on that. But like I've had my last company did it and my self-evaluation, I would send it in and I would never hear anything back. And like they would just kind of like be like, okay, you did the thing, and I didn't feel like I got very much like just like input on things and like which I do kind of need. So at least this I do get to like look at it and go over it with my boss, but I would prefer if they are. It seems like it's I write it and then they look at what I wrote as opposed to more of like I write my thoughts, they write theirs, and we go, okay, and it covers, I think, a broader range of things that way.
Gotcha.
But just, yeah, in general, it helped me kind of make up some like plans for myself and goals to target so that I can continue to like grow in my role, improve how I'm doing things and everything for this coming year. So it's definitely a good thing to do. It's not necessarily like a happy or a sad or like it's just kind of a neutral seed. It's just
Hmm.
like I think this is like something that's valuable to do to kind
Yeah, for
of
sure.
plan ahead and all. So, but yeah, that's been my week and my rose thorn and seed. But how have you been doing? How was your Thanksgiving? I know you had, I think you had your parents over, right?
Yeah, well, my dad came up on Friday. Sarah was over at her family on the day. I had the very rare opportunity to just be home with Sasha. There was a member of the family that got a puppy in like their extended family that brought it, and I don't believe Sasha does too well with other dogs. Like at this age because it's just been Cole. She's never been like
Yeah.
integrated really, so it's like not that good. So I was like, yeah, I'll just stay home with her. That's fine. So I enjoyed a very quiet Thanksgiving, and then me and Sarah just enjoyed our time together in the evening.
Nice.
But my dad came up on Friday, so yeah, just like pleasant holidays. It was all good. But yeah, my rose here for the week would be, and I think it was a seed previously. So interestingly enough, something planted came to fruition. We got the Christmas tree up this past weekend. Got it all
Yes.
decorated out in the living room. So it's nice to just like have that element done. We don't have a whole bunch of decorations. We're not going crazy, but we do have the tree up, so we'll be able to enjoy that like for the whole month and really just have it be an unstuck thing because it was something that didn't get done until way late last year, and it was just
Gotcha.
a bit of a frustration.
Well, yeah,
And
it's like I just put this thing up and it takes all this time and I have to take it down and store it away.
mhm,
And so like you're getting the full holiday spirit package this year.
that's a really good way to say it. So yeah, that's my rose here for the week, and my thorn is a bit of an interesting one. So I had a class here today down at down in at one of the local massage schools around, and it was a really good class though with one of the teachers that I saw last time, and I really underrate the value of brain food where I come out of that, and while I would have eaten the exact same things I would have on like any other day and been fine even through like a bunch of massages and this or that, like I very much underrate how much the brain needs fuel when in like truly engaged on a day like today where you're like learning ideas and listening and going hands on and like integrating with the other students in the classroom and sharing ideas and like being ready to like hop up and move on to the next thing, maybe answer a question, like present an idea, whatever's going on, you like got to
Mm.
be there and in tune. You're trying to take in information, you're trying to learn as much as you can. You're also like thinking in your mind like a couple moments happen where I just learn a thing, and I'm thinking of a client of like, oh, I could definitely use that there. So like you're just working the whole time.
Yeah.
And I had lunch, took time, like I felt full, enjoyed it. But you come out from it was ended up being like a 7 hour day basically, and you're just like, whoo, man.
Yeah.
But also, interestingly, I feel like I absorbed all of it. I feel like it was like super useful and like very engaging. So it's just interesting to note like what you did, how you felt, contributing factors, what was different, and you get this little look of like, man, like it really is like burning calories up there, like
Mm.
to keep you in tune and moving and working. And I just thought that was like a super interesting thing because I don't get that all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah. You're able to, yeah, I think that's a cool thing to recognize. Like, yeah, maybe going into that day just having had like a couple like or a cup of coffee and like a granola bar or something like rolling into the day, or is something that you're like, okay, well maybe I have a full meal, have the lunch, everything, and really kind of keep giving myself the energy, because 7 hours of class time is a long day, hands on or not. Like that's a long day, especially for us folks who have not been in school for a while. It
Exactly. Yeah.
it's pretty mentally exhausting. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was just interesting to feel the effects of that. And yeah, like you were saying, just use that data moving forward to be like, okay, maybe I'll, plan to have a little bit bigger, maybe a more nutritious breakfast, and maybe bring like a snack or two to like supplement the lunch in the afternoon, and then, I'm sure you come out feeling pretty good.
definitely.
So yeah, just a good full day, but just kind of wanted to note that feed your brain, man. It's working. So that's my thorn here, and my seed here for the week. Boy, howdy, sir. We've got another hunter in the bayou.
Okay.
So Sarah has been looking, and she is just
Ooh.
like, yeah, 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 yeah. So it's just been like a whirlwind of telling stories about games, getting into games. Obviously, I think we have like 300 some hours into Don't Starve together. So like it's been bubbling, right? It's
Yeah.
been really bubbling and growing. And finally she was like, dude, I want to pull the trigger. I've been looking at laptops. I'm really excited about your new one. Like she's like, I kind of fucking love it. It's sick. And so she pulled the trigger on a new Lenovo Legion laptop. She's got a
Nice.
couple of new games downloaded. She's been like, dude, she's been jamming. And one of the games, Hunt was on sale. She was like, I really think I would like to try that. It seems like you guys have a lot of fun. So she played her first couple of rounds, just killing zombies, getting to learn the flow of the thing, getting used to like the first person shooter vibe. And boy, let me tell you, dude, her hand was like a laser onto those zombies' heads. Like she
Nice.
was like actually a natural. And she kept like I kept saying that, and she would be like, "Oh no, 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 no." But I was like, dude, you're just like one tapping them, just like bap, 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 bap.
Love
Dude,
it.
it was
That's
sick.
awesome.
And then so yeah, it was just funny getting her up to speed, and helping her with the setup and all that. So yeah, it was a good time. So we have another member of the PC Master Race here. So
Very cool. Was that
give
a
her a warm welcome.
Black Friday PC deal?
Yeah, yeah,
Nice.
like it
I
was.
mean,
We
that's
took
like
advantage of that.
perfect timing for her to be like, yeah, let's do this thing.
Yeah, it was actually like pretty big savings, so we were pleased.
Yeah, that's all. That's awesome and cool that she's like wants to. I was gonna actually, before you said she was just like beaming the zombies, I was gonna say if she wants to work on it. I think it's called what I forget what it's called. It's like aimbot or something. Not like a cheat code, but like there's a
No, I think you're talking about AIM Labs.
aim labs. That's what it is. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
AIM Labs, I have it downloaded because I used it a bit when I was first switching from COD to Valorant and playing more of that, so that I could like try and get used to the different shooting method and whatnot, because that helped
Mm,
out, and I feel like it would help or be pretty similar for Hunt as it is for like Valorant. I feel like that is more similar in shooting style
mm-hmm,
to each other than it is to like Call of Duty or anything.
mm-hmm. Yeah, because you do have to. You're like stopping to fire. You're not like sliding and shooting.
Yeah. So,
No, that's actually interesting. So where she could like practice the skills, not in the like tense environment.
yeah, it's just
Yeah, that's actually a great
like
idea.
crash dummy looking things set
Yep.
up that you just boop boop boop, or like dots and things like that
Yep.
that
That's
you
sweet.
target. So, yeah, it's cool. There's like a bunch of different things that you can do in it. I think you might even be able to adjust for like certain games to like practice. Like I think it may have some ability to switch like styles of shooting as it would between
Okay.
games and whatnot. So it's a cool, cool
Nice.
little program, free. So if she wants to, that's not a bad option to check out.
Yeah, I'll have to throw that recommendation. That's a great idea. But yeah, man, that's my rose, thorn, and seed here for the week. It's been good catching up. You want to talk about do some like Formula One recap, or do we have some loose notes that we want to get into first?
Just some loose notes. So I guess
Do it.
first I'll lead off talking about. I just wanted to briefly talk about or more so tell you about DMZ, which is Call of Duty's like Warzone extraction game, similar to Hunt. So I thought that would be an easy lead in, but it's interesting because I didn't know how they were going to do it, since you usually have your loadouts built and everything, and you're like, you can't just bring like if you die, you can't like lose that from Warzone and the other Call of Duty games just because you died in DMZ. So it is cool. They figured out to have a similar system as Hunt, where you have like your character and you go in with your guns, but if you if you die, you lose your guns. Like you can extract and take things out and like have an inventory that you can like reload, but there is a challenge that you have to like complete to unlock one of the guns in Warzone. So I just was going into this solo, into like, they only have one mode where it's 3-person teams, I think.
Gotcha.
And so I went in solo, lost my guns immediately from dying, and like now I have to go into every game with just my fists and like find ways to get guns, either by looting or by like they have AI, like similar to like the zombies in Hunt, that you can kill,
Right.
but they have weapons, so you can pick up their weapons. But
Okay, so there's
Yeah.
no
there's
like
no free
marketplace?
rotation. No.
That's tough.
Not that I've found thus far. I'm
Gotcha.
like just kind of feel like SOL. So I just find a car at the start of every game, run over some AIs and try and steal their guns. But I've not been successful. The AIs are actually really good in the game. Like,
Sure.
and I think the biggest thing that I found interesting, because I went into it thinking it would be kind of like Hunt, in like melee range, these bots suck. Like, they're garbage. Ranged, there's always a bunch of them together, like 5, 6, 7, and like they're just lighting you up with their guns. Like in Hunt, you can kind of stay further back, kill things, like run away. These guys, it's just like, oh, they saw you and now you are getting hit by a firing squad, and it's like, Jesus Christ. So
Damn.
it's been a little bit of a funky adjustment to that after playing Hunt. I thought they would be slightly more similar, but there's a few more differences than I expected.
Wait, so like, doesn't that mean that there would be a lot of players running around with their fists?
I mean, maybe
You would have to like, you gotta.
It's a huge map, and so I don't know how many people are in it.
So what's the objective other than just being there and trying to get out?
So there's different like bosses around the map, but they are like marked on the map. So it's basically a competition to try and claim the bounties. One of them is the one that I'm trying to kill to unlock this gun, but I've been unsuccessful thus far.
So why not just like try and loot a gun and then just extract?
I mean, I could, but
like slowly build like a good loadout that you could hopefully get around in with.
I could do that.
Seems too janky. I don't like that at all.
Yeah, so like I could do that and like just try and build up some inventory and whatnot, but I also just really want to unlock this gun, and then I'm like, once I do that, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll play the mode like the way I'm supposed to. But for the
Right.
meantime, I'm trying to basically speed run to this guy so that other people who are also trying to do the same thing as me don't get there first. And
Damn.
so I'm like, I'm
Not even a
basically trying
pistol?
to nothing. I'm
What?
basically trying
That's
to like
stupid.
speed run this challenge solo. So if I get knocked
Right.
down by anything, bots, other like
You're
players,
just done,
whatever,
yeah.
I'm just out.
Right.
So
Mhm.
it's not been the easiest, but I thought that would intrigue you, pique your interest. Once I play more, I'll like try and give a better rundown of what all like I haven't come across yet, I guess.
Sure.
But yeah, it's been interesting. But I did also want to like just kind of get your thoughts on. So with Warzone, when it first came out and everything for that Warzone 2, I was not really a big fan. I really like gave it the old college try. I like kept telling myself like, "Hey, it's a new game. Like I'm just not used to it yet," and these things. And the more and more I played, because there are things that I do like about it and changes that I think they made that I liked. I didn't want it to just be the same game with a new map. But there were some changes that were like pretty drastic. And so like the one night I was playing with my friends, and I played for maybe like 2 hours, and I swear I was just dead for like 45 minutes to an hour of it. And
Hmm.
like legitimately. And so they like nerfed the amounts of money that are around the map. So it's like I we I died early on in a game a couple of times. Like we got in a like brawl right at the start with another team, and I died and like was just sitting there, and my team is just spending the entire game running around trying to get money, trying to buy people back. Every time like you get enough money, there's people camping the buy stations, just like sitting there watching them, like
Brutal.
not actually playing the game. And so I was like, this is way too difficult to like. There were just it seemed so bizarre because there were things that like were working so well in the old game that they just like didn't bring over into the new one. And like
Okay.
if you're gonna nerf money or like make it a little more difficult or anything, totally cool. Like it was a little outrageous in the last game how easy it was to like get money to buy your teammate back. So they've tried to make it a bit more realistic and whatnot, but it was like just went a bit too far. And so it's like I just kind of wonder with games like this or with like League of Legends when they have big season shifts, um, like it just doesn't seem like they're doing enough testing of these things. Like I feel like we always hear pros coming out and complaining about big changes in league, and like they kind of end up backtracking some of the stuff. Riot ends up like shifting things around. Even just now in the preseason for League, Ravenous Hydra has become like extremely OP to the point that like people or characters like Aatrox who have that sustain and in like team fighting prowess are just so snowbally that it's like hard
Hmm.
to play. And so I like I don't even know what my question is really, but like I just think it's crazy that these games make these big shifts and just don't seem to like properly vet them. Like Nade Shot had a clip the other day of him raging about it. Like he went off because his game just like kept crashing or something like that. And it's like he's like it was some weird like bug that it was like if you have over a X amount of FPS, which people with like high quality streaming things and everything have, if you just don't set a frame rate cap, it like the game reaching over whatever frame rates or something like that would just crash the game every time. And so these the game comes out and there's just like all these bugs and issues and things like
Mhm.
that, and it's just like, how are these things like not really being like tested to make sure that it's good? These
Well,
companies have so much money and time to
yeah.
like do these
Well,
things.
that's the thing. They don't have time. They have money, but they don't have time. So the Modern Warfare 1, that was last year's title. Warzone was last year's title. So like either they're working on 2 or 3 projects at the same time so they can like tier releases, or they're putting all of their resources into the build and release of a game that launches. They allocate X amount of resources to maintaining that game, and then they push forward and just begin making a new one. But you can't just release the same game, but your stock
Well,
has to go up. You have to sell more games than you did last year.
yeah, but
So
isn't it like, what about when video game when we were kids, there was like rarely an expansion or some like download, like you got your cartridge that you put into your Game Boy or your
I had the
Nintendo
full game.
64 or your Sega Genesis, and everything's there. And if there's some little wonky bug like there was in NHL 99, where if you mashed the shoot button at the face off at center ice, you would score a goal like 99% of the time. Like, there, yeah, there are bugs in old games, but I feel like there were a lot fewer of them than we see now. Companies just like pushing out content and then going,
Yeah,
yeah, we'll fix it later. Like
right.
like why not take the time to balance these things so you have positive reactions from your fan base, and
Mhm.
then like make minor tweaks instead of having to drastically shift.
Yeah, well, and then there's a problem of like these releases are like they're called AAA for a reason. Like they appeal to a massive population of the gaming world. Like those games are titles that like an uncle might pick up to bring to a weekend as like an idea of like a bond with maybe like a teen. Like I can imagine even non-gamers knowing that Call of Duty like is a video game that is playable and like
And
could be an
generally
easy.
like what the game is too, like in the mainstream.
Right. Right. So if the net is so large, like you're only going to be able to hit like a 60 to 75% like enjoyment rate just in general, because everybody's idea of what is best in a Call of Duty game is going to change drastically, and what there would be designing for is the best play experience for everyone. Or they had like that's one idea. Another idea would be that they had some interesting game flow idea that they thought their Warzone was supposed to be. So they just let one go and they said, yeah, but we wanted it to be slower. We wanted it to be a little more tactical. We wanted
which
deaths to be a little more punishing.
which they've done in a lot of ways, and like, which is why I thought that those changes were like, especially with like the money, were pretty extreme. How much
Mhm.
of your fan base is going to want to keep playing a game when, if they die right off the bat, they just have
Mhm.
to be like your little brother with the unplugged controller, being like, "Yeah, I'm having fun. I'm playing the game," as you're just watching the screen.
Right.
Like, they did make the game, the maps bigger, same amount of people, so it is
Mhm.
slower.
Mhm.
They removed a lot of like fast ways to get around the map.
Mm-hmm.
Made like vehicles more difficult to drive. Vehicles don't have unlimited gas anymore. You have to
Yep.
go to like a service station and fill up and it repairs your vehicle. Helicopters are
Mm-hmm.
a goddamn nightmare to fly now. I
Mm-hmm.
was bad at it before in the old game, and now every time I fly one, the only way I'm landing is I literally just jump out and I
Mm-hmm.
ghost the chopper and let it crash and burn. I'm like, so there are like a lot of things that they've done that made it like slower paced, try to give it more tactical. They made it more realistic. The guns
Mm-hmm.
are harder to use. Timing, bullet drops, like how far to lead things, very
Mm-hmm.
difficult. They made it so you can't like move super crazy. It's more realistic so you're not like twerking around and like doing stuff to juke out shots. You actually have to like position better if you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
get lit up. So it's like they've made like a lot of changes that I thought changed the pace of the game, like that almost like that identity of it.
Yeah.
But just like went too far on some things that like didn't make sense, and also
Okay.
just like other like user interface things like pinging. Like hunt pings are not as like bam in your face as the old Warzone was.
Mm-hmm.
In Warzone 2, it's like next to impossible to even see them. Like that
Mm.
is a system that I was like there was absolutely nothing wrong with the old pinging system. Like it
Right.
was probably just like perfect. Like you're on this giant map. It was like clearly visible. It wasn't obnoxious or like
Mm.
too like attention grabbing on the
Yep.
screen, but you knew where you were going or whatnot. And now it's like, oh, you mean that little sliver of a white line? Like
Mm-hmm.
what? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting conversation because I'm like, I was thinking about like old games. I'm like, man, they didn't like Super Smash Bros. Melee has like not had much change to it, if any, that I can really
Mm-hmm.
think of. And there have been so many like metas in that game in terms of
Mm-hmm.
like what characters are kind of the best, and just like it's a very well balanced game out of the box, like just going right into it.
Yeah, I for the most part, I think there were some. I think there were some champs that had some like pretty like strong histories compared to others. But yeah, I think there is. Well, it's just so hard to know like what the company is selecting for when they release a game. Like
Yeah,
what do they want it to be? What do they care about working in the thing? And unfortunately, I believe like there is likely some kind of uh like philosophical disagreement between like a well-balanced Super Smash and a just a new like Call of Duty release. I understand that there have been multiple Smash releases, but is there, and this is just a question, is there a different intention from the company where they set up to design from the ground up a world where no matter what hero you wanted to pick, it would be like competitive and viable in the environment? And then from the AAA company perspective, are they just worried about having a game out that is prettier, bigger, flashier than the next one? But when you actually get to the gameplay, it's like, well, wait, this is not like really the thing I was looking for. Like it sounds like
well,
it's becoming like an Arma or like a more like military sim
a
style.
little bit in some ways, but it's still Warzone. It's still the same
Sure.
like concept, the same like goal of the game and whatnot, but they've
Right.
made it just like added a little more realism from it being like, oh, I have the right attachments on this gun, and now I send a laser beam at you and you just die. Like it does take a little bit more, like I said, like tactical nature, which I think is fine. But I think the problem I'm having is, like you're saying, like games come out and there is a kind of target that the company probably has about what they're looking for. That's the same thing that old games had too, though. They were released with the target, and it was like, hey, if you don't like the game, like, too fucking bad, you just don't like the game. This is the game that we have, so like play it or don't. And that was, I think, the motivation maybe to like build a more balanced and like just ready out of box game, where now it seems almost like laziness. It's like they have the game and they're like, well, we can just like fix it later if things like aren't good. And like Call of Duty, they have yearly releases typically, but they also have used like 3 different companies to make like back-to-back games in rotation to allow the other companies to like have the time needed to like do this. So
okay, so they are tiering the projects.
So yeah, but like so it's all under the Call of Duty brand, but it's like with different production companies for the games.
And people definitely have their preferences, like, and I don't know like who owns who, but in my mind traditionally it was Infinity Ward made a portion of the games, and then was it Activision that made another portion of the games?
Yeah, and so
and then whoever the third one is, I'm not sure.
Raven Software is like they're newer, I think, partner or whatever.
And were they the like Black Ops team?
I think they might have been. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't 100% know who did what,
but either way, this is a company that's utilizing 3 different like design team studios to make sure they're hitting these yearly releases. Right. But like you're talking about, you're going to get these inconsistencies in design philosophy if like last year Activision made and then this year Infinity War made it, right?
Yeah, so I do expect that, but I would also expect that as a whole, Call of Duty, like the brand and the company, would try to be like, hey, like, yes, you're making your own game, you're using your own engines, whatever, like however you do that, or whatever the differences would be between companies, but to be like, hey, we think that X, Y, and Z should remain pretty consistent. Like if you have some tweaks and all, like that's fine, but we just want to vet them before pushing it through because we think that X, Y, and Z were working well in, or that people liked them, or that they were. Because, like, if you're just changing something that was popular for the sake of, like, oh, gotta make it different, then, like, that's always gonna piss a group of people off, especially if it's something that was working well. It's gonna piss a larger group of people off. So,
yeah.
Like, I've taken a short break from Warzone. I'm, like, just leveling up guns, playing the regular Call of Duty multiplayer game, like, on maps, search and, well, I don't play search and destroy, but whatever, all the other game modes, because I was like, I don't dislike the game and the guns and things like that. It was just playing Warzone, a lot of it, I was just like, I feel like I can't even play because I'm just dead, and things like that were just not super enjoyable. Or I was on the other side and I'm running around trying to find money, can't find anything to, like, buy my teammates back, and then, like, before I can, or after running for 10 minutes and looking in every little nook and cranny, I just get, like, nuked by a team. And I'm like, well, that was a huge waste of time. So
right.
So
and
I
it
mean,
was less of a shooter and more of a looter.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been interesting. I'm definitely going to give it more of a try because, I mean, obviously, like we've talked about, they're making updates and trying to meet some of these, like, issues that the community as a whole have had. I'm not the only person that's kind of had these same issues. But it just like was a little mind boggling to be like, why was it even released like this? Like, it doesn't even make sense. These are like very obvious things for someone who I've played it 5-6 nights, something like that. Like, a couple hours each time. Nothing like I'm not putting in like logging crazy hours, and these are things that I've immediately noticed. And I'm like, did
Gotcha.
any of you play the game? Like,
Gotcha.
so, but that is I guess enough of that side talk. I know we have some different F1 things to kind of get into, so we can I'll I guess keep you updated on any changes and if things start to move in that direction. But did you have, I guess, any initial off-season conversations or things that you saw during the past week with teams or anything you wanted to hit on?
Well, I think the like most interesting thing right out of the gate is the Ferrari team principal being released, Matteo Binotto. I don't know who, if it has been decided who will be stepping in.
Yeah,
But I know that he was released. I guess the results of this year for Ferrari were not what they expected. So they are going a different route.
Yeah, and so he technically resigned, but I guess it was very much one of those like resign or you're fired kind of things, like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I did think that was pretty interesting, and also I don't know how much effect it will have, but with Ferrari looking to replace Mattia, I think one interesting part is he was both the team principal but also their technical director because he has an engineering background. So typically those are two separate people for like teams, like Christian Horner being the team principal and Newey being the I think Adrian Newey, I think it is, being like the what is it, the technical director for Red Bull. So I don't know what their salaries look like, but clearly salaries of staff based on the Red Bull budget cap things and whatnot are a part of that budget cap, is like those folks, even if it's not the driver salaries. So now they will have to hire an additional person. I don't know if the pay is going to like be comparable having two people to do the job that one man was doing initially. So I think that may be interesting because I mean, I would imagine a team principal or technical director would probably be making something in the millions of euros range. So I feel like having two people that you might have to pay that much could, even if it's a small impact, have a slight impact kind of onto their ability to design and whatnot in that cap.
Yeah, I think. Well, when you talk about this, I just think of uh, the McLaren team principal Zach Brown, where he talks about just understanding that different people in the team have different strengths, and like he doesn't try and like run the pit wall when he's there. He's just there to observe and help out where he can. If he can like be kind of a floater, he will. Overall, like that's not where his voice is needed. He's needed elsewhere and to have input on these other things. So I don't know like why my brain goes there. It feels like I like that managerial style better, where like yes, an individual may have a background and it may help them in conversations with this department, but it's likely better to have like a separation of head and state in that scenario to fully give the fully give like the power and initiative of the role to the individual, so they don't ever feel like they have to like maybe play two sides of a card or whatever it
Mhm.
is. Because that feels like a lot of responsibility at that level where
Yeah.
you should just either be designing the car or like running the team to whatever degree that means.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the more we're breaking this down, the more I'm just like, damn, dude, I just kind of feel like rough for Matteo Binotto. Like that's a tough position to be in, and that is just his education level. It was like it like ended up like being a curse. They needed him for too much.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a like the perspective that I've had on it too. I didn't realize that until this week when I was seeing all the conversation about it come out, because I mean we have had the opportunity to occasionally see that kind of thing in other sports, and in the closest comparisons you can make, which would be like in the NFL, we had a period of time where the Houston Texans head coach was Bill O'Brien and the team manager was also Bill O'Brien. So, like, he was making not only all of the game day decisions and play calls and XYZ, who's starting, who's whatever, but also, like, having full control of trading players and things like that, and made
Mm,
some like not great moves, and most likely based on personal interactions as opposed to like quality of player, letting
right.
players that were very good just like go for getting very little back for them in trades and whatnot. And so like it is like surprising that they put him in that position, because I think that also does to some extent help to give a little insight into maybe what some of Ferrari's woes were this year in terms
Whoa.
of like strategy, and like maybe the man just had too much going on that he wasn't able to like really nail down what was going to be the best. Maybe if they're
Hmm.
worrying about, oh, signs like spun off into a wall in FP3, so we got to have the engineers and the mechanics working overnight, and he's not getting enough time studying like the times and the data on the wheels. Like, not saying that that's like what was happening. I have
Sure.
no idea, but I would
Just outlining a
imagine.
scenario where efforts were split where they should have been focused.
Right,
Yeah.
where it could just be that maybe in some of those scenarios he was not able to give as much direction as other team principals could have,
Sure.
due to being overwhelmed with responsibility, information, all of that.
Yeah, and
So,
that's like heavy giving him the benefit of the doubt, but I think you're definitely onto something with the idea of like, it's that dual citizenship, dual role is I would be inclined to agree with you and say that that would have had to be a factor to some of their like to use your phrase, like the game day decisions, like how much of it was how much of it was this like what am I getting at? It felt like some of the woes of Ferrari on the race days were the like pit wall to driver to engineer communication. And does the how much in Ferrari does the team principal have to do with that? And if priorities are split, how much did that like factor in? And if he only had to be team principal, would those drivers have been better taken care of? These are things that we'll never know, but like
right.
just thinking of what could have been going on behind the scenes, I just think that's a good point to bring up
Yeah,
because he is just human after all.
and talking about those like decisions and whatnot on race day, yeah, each team has their own pit wall, and Bonato is kind of there, like man, overseeing, I'd say, more than like managing that. But if I would assume that he is the one who's making the decisions on strategies and things like that. Whether you're splitting tire strategies, like what your target is. If you think that the undercut's going to be good, then yeah, like go on the soft tires early while Max and Checo are on the mediums, and like get those lap times in, pit early, get the undercut. Like, but if he is having less time to like come up with those plans and everything, then there's less communication kind of coming down to the pit walls for each driver's team and everything. So like I do think it will be very interesting next year to see if there are any shifts in the strategy and whatnot, or improvements, changes, that were like, oh, that's like, I think it's something I'll be keeping an eye on, because they clearly have a good car, and so I don't think that that's all of a sudden gonna like change drastically going into the second year of the new regulations. But I think that if they have someone who is able to primarily focus just on like strategy and whatnot, that could be a nice improvement for it. But there was, I guess, another just like weird note that I saw. And so it sounded like Bonotto and the Ferrari, like the president of the board for Ferrari, or the owner, or I'm not sure exactly what status this guy was, but just like had not had the best relationship over the past couple of years, to the point that Ferrari had actually approached both Andreas Seidel of McLaren as well as Christian Horner last year, before the season, about coming on board to be the team principal for Ferrari. And both of them were like, nah, we're good. They were, yeah. So that's kind of almost why this change in leadership didn't happen before this season. Like they were looking to see, hey, is there a better option than Bonotto out there? So
Interesting. Well, I'm curious, and he's just like fully gone, not going to be involved
not with
at
Ferrari, at least. I
all.
mean,
Okay.
we'll see. I wouldn't be shocked to see other teams like take a look at him, or at least have him as a consulting kind of person, because
Sure.
it's clear that he has like a lot of knowledge. It's just in that role in Ferrari, it didn't pan out as well as they would have hoped.
Sure. Yeah, they may take a peek at his resume. I'll leaf through it.
He's been around the grid. I think
Yeah.
they've got each other's numbers and whatnot, the different
Sure.
teams. So
Sure.
but yeah, the other notes I kind of had. So Mercedes, of course, they're still kind of teasing the idea of having Mick join them, and having him on as either a reserve or like a test driver for Mercedes. I had sent you the other week. So Arthur Leclerc, the younger brother of Charles Leclerc, moved from F3 this year up into F2, and I've watched some of his races. He has like some pretty good skills. I feel like he's fun to watch driving. Like he's definitely got some things to like grow on, but as a young driver, I think that makes sense. It seemed from what I saw that his quali performances were not always like quite up, so it would put him in a position where he was like having to make a lot of passes and whatnot up through the field, which he was like doing pretty well at in the races that I was watching. He was consistently like working his way through the field and looked like pretty strong, but it was the fact that he was starting lower down the grid that was kind of hampering some of his like having the most success.
Sure. Now, who does he drive for going into Formula 2?
So he is going to be driving for where did I put it? So he's going to be driving for DAMS Racing.
Okay.
So they I don't know too much about them. I think Liam Lawson was driving for them or is
Okay.
driving for them. So,
Gotcha.
so one of the decent, or like they've had some like solid F2 drivers.
Sure.
So I think that'll be cool to just see because going from F3 to F2, they do get more racing opportunities. Like F3, you have kind of this like much smaller pool of races and whatnot. Their season ends a lot earlier. They only race at a few tracks. F2, obviously, they kind of go all throughout the season, including having a finale at Abu Dhabi. So I'm just curious to see how he does in that F2 atmosphere. Obviously, the brother Charles Leclerc, is a name to kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah, yeah. I think as far as like family talent, yeah, definitely keep an eye. I think it'd be interesting. The younger brother getting a crack at the older brother on the Formula One grid. I think that would be an interesting storyline that would take a couple years in the making, I imagine, but
Yeah,
maybe one that we may see in the future.
I mean we've had Michael and Ralph Schumacher before, so I believe they're brothers, so I don't think it would be the first time, but it is kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
The other one of the other small notes that I had was just Logan Sargent picked his number for his driver number for next year, so he's going to go with
Nice.
the number 2, which was last used by Stoffel Van Dorn for McLaren.
Okay. Okay.
But that was kind of the bigger thing with that. It's not like a big deal at all. And then Max is, of course, going to continue using the number 1. He said in an interview, he was like, "How often do you get the chance to drive with the starting number 1 in your Formula One career?" He's like, "You never know. I could always be back to number 33 if I'm not the world champion." But he's like, "It's like I'm gonna keep using this number 1 while I can," which
Yeah, for
I
sure.
like. I think that's a pretty cool perk of being the driver's champion from the previous year.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think that's an interesting thing that they, as part of like the package of, being world champion. I think that's pretty interesting. And yeah, if, I imagine anybody would roll with it as long as they could.
Yeah. So I think driver numbers are always like they aren't a big deal, but it's always like they're interesting to me, kind of hearing
Yeah.
like why it when drivers talk about like why they picked their different numbers. Like Lewis, his number 44 is apparently just like it was the number 44 was like on his dad's license plate growing up for his like dad's like family car, and he was just
Gotcha.
like you need a number, and he's just like 44 is the gist of like what I read at one point earlier this year, and I'm
Sure.
like oh that's fine, like it's something that like reminds him of his dad. It's just like a long standing kind of thing, so those things are cool. And I guess with Logan Sargent, he picked his because he's a big fan of, I think, Wagner, who is a soccer player, is number 2, who he's a big fan of.
Gotcha.
So kind of a just little tidbit on him. Looking at kind of postseason and the coming year, though, I saw a couple notes that I thought were interesting. So going over to the Alpine garage, Esteban Ocon came out and talked in an interview, basically saying that he's happy that Fernando is going to Aston Martin and is gone, because he said that he was doing like 98% of the work on the simulator, on marketing, development work with like the engineers and all, while Fernando is doing about 2%. Obviously, I'm sure that's a little bit of an exaggeration,
Sure.
but it sounds like it was not the happiest of garages to be around. And it is interesting because we didn't really hear that throughout the season. It surprised me a little bit.
I imagine for drivers, it is not that useful to put individuals on blast like throughout the year. I feel like you're so close, you're so involved. There's just so much talking. Obviously, in the
It's
off season,
better
there's
to
still a
have
lot
a
of talking.
healthy-ish relationship, or at least one where you're not shit talking each other.
Right, at least like one where you can like work with each other and whatever, and talking shit on your interviews would make it pretty hard. So I respect Ocon for at least like holding his tongue. But yeah, I would imagine if you caught Fernando in a mood, he would say, "Yeah, I was doing like 98% of the work on the simulator, and Ocon was doing about two," and he would genuinely believe that. That's the thing. Like they would both believe the exact flip flop of the story.
Right.
So whatever, take it with a grain of salt.
And
However, here's
oh,
here's
go
my
ahead.
go ahead.
No, I was
Well,
gonna say I kind of do like. I think that it's not hard to believe that Ocon was doing a bit more of the lifting, just in terms of
Mhm.
like he was the test reserve simulator driver for a bit for Renault. Like I mean, he's the younger guy. Like he's got a bit more, just probably like stamina and energy than Fernando does at 41 years old compared to
Mhm.
Ocon's what, like 25, like
Mhm.
25, 26. So it doesn't. It makes sense in my brain that Ocon would have done more. I just
Yeah.
like it was definitely drastic in terms of the numbers. But what were you gonna say?
Definitely along the same lines. I'm glad you hit that note of it though. The element of he is a much more senior driver, not just in Formula One, but just in his career in general. So like let just taking the marketing as like an individual thing. I would I would say that Ann Ocon would be way more interested in marketing at this point in his career. Like he's trying to secure a whole bunch of seats into the future. Alonso just cares about securing a seat for the following year because it seems like he's at a point in his career where he may be like, no, I think I want to go do like IMSA next year. I think I want to do like WEC. Like he's got different goals at this point in his career. Well, like you could imagine, right? Like I don't talk to this guy
Oh no,
personally, but
100%.
so just from a marketing perspective, yeah, of course Ocon's going to be like out there pushing the social media and this and that because like
He's
he kind of
also
has to.
he's also younger. Like it's probably more in his wheelhouse with like those
Exactly.
things.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's look at like the simulator work. Like you said, he was a reserve driver. That's like kind of it's likely still part of his responsibilities to a certain degree, but just looking at just driving the simulator and development work, I would argue that Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon have a similar driving style. We've seen Ocon get into position like risky positions looking for like key overtakes at moments where maybe other drivers wouldn't have gone for it, and we've seen Alonso do the exact same thing. So one could argue like they probably enjoy a similar car. So from
Yeah.
Fernando's perspective, he doesn't have to do it because Ocon's just going to develop the car in a way that just by default is going to work for Alonso anyway. So why would he care?
Or just he
And
has enough experience that he's driven enough cars that he's like,
right,
hell, however you make it, I
right,
can drive the style of the car. Like I can, like we've talked about with Danny Ricks and everything. He
getting
obviously
in tune with the car.
he obviously like didn't feel as comfortable in his
Hmm.
first year of Renault. He did in his second year of Renault, but the cars like that suit his driving style and the way that
Hmm.
he likes to drive and be aggressive on the brakes and things like that. Of course he's gonna like look better and feel more comfortable. Hell, if he had not ever been in Red Bull, if he had started in another driving team in a Williams or in something else, maybe he never would have had the successes that he had because of their car's philosophy and the way that it
Sure.
drove. Like I'm rewatching the 2016 season, like I was saying, and the Williams cars were fucking good. Like, they are like competitive in the top 4 to 8 range consistently. Like, I see, like, looking at that, I'm like, oh wow, like no wonder they took when Nico left, they took Valtteri and brought him in alongside Lewis. He was putting in dope performances with this Williams that was a competitive car. But then to look and see them go, okay, like we're bringing George from that garbage Williams, like the evaluation was very different between those two moves in terms of drivers lineups.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that that's the thing with Fernando is like he probably doesn't need as much simulator work either because he's just like I've driven these tracks for like almost like since you were 5 years old, Esteban. I know these tracks like the back of my hand.
Right. So yeah, when I hear these things, I'm just kind of like, okay. But
Yeah.
if you take it apart a little bit, there's like kind of decent reasons as to why that may have been the case for even him to like have that, like pretty aggressive take, or not aggressive, but just like I'll say inflated take of it,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, whatever. And then for him to say like good riddance, I mean, he's just working with a guy that just wants to win more than he does and is probably a little just from like a competitor's perspective, like he's always gonna think Ocon's number two in reference to him. He's like
Right. Yeah.
he's the main guy. Like, of course they're not gonna be like friends with each other
Yeah, definitely.
to a certain degree. So yeah, I mean,
And it even
go ahead,
speaks
Ocon, that's fun.
and it kind of speaks to like what we're talking about too after so Fernando in the postseason testing put in 97 laps in the Aston Martin, and he said it felt very similar to the Alpine car. And I'm like, I really don't know if I believe you because obviously the Alpine was like the faster car throughout the year and whatnot, had better straight line speed and these things. But I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it's just he's like, I can drive anything. I've driven IndyCar. I've driven this. I've driven that. Like,
That's what
so
I think it is.
so that's interesting. But back to Alpine for a moment. So the other kind of things that I wanted to briefly say and get your thoughts on. So Alpine has come out and basically said that for this coming year, Ocon and Gasly will start out at least having equal status in the team. There won't be like a one driver and a two driver, even though Ocon's been there and has had experience. And also Ferrari has come out and essentially said the same thing. And I think Leclerc has also reiterated like Ferrari's plan for next year to not have a one or a two driver between him and Carlos, but he emphasized the point that at some point in the season, like a decision in terms of priority kind of has to be made. Like, I think Leclerc is looking back at this past season and going, man, I was in the driver's fight for a long time due to my own like successes and whatnot, and only being hampered by our reliability issues and the like maybe not quite keeping up in improvements made on the car. Like, maybe if the team would have given team orders or prioritized me as the number one, and it seemed like you obviously no driver is going into the F1 season thinking of themselves as a number two driver necessarily.
Sure.
They're like, I am the number one driver till I'm not. And Leclerc has said as much in past interviews. I saw one that said that they were like, oh, would you help your I think talking about Checo and Carlos and all, they're like, oh, would you help your teammate if they were like to win, if they were like in the battle for the drivers championship? And he's like, well, that wouldn't happen because I would be the one in the battle for the drivers championship. Like, that's the mindset. These guys have made it there
Right.
because they have the winner's mentality. And I mean a number of other things, but I don't
Right.
think you get to that level without having that in your mental. Like,
Right. Which of course goes back to like, yeah, duh, Alonso wasn't gonna like make it fun for you in the garage, dude. Like you guys are
right.
competing against each other. Like
Right,
stop.
you're each other's biggest rival. Like, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
you are reliant on the team being successful to some extent for you to
Sure.
be successful, but like you're also trying to beat the other guy every single week.
Hmm.
And like that is your primary, especially in the midfield, because you're like, some tracks this is the most we're getting out of the car. So if I beat everyone I'm supposed to and beat my teammate, then like that's a good week.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
but yeah, I think that it's interesting to see statements so early on, like kind of in the summer, or even just like this being vocalized at all, that there's not a 1 and 2 driver, that they are seen as equals coming in, because to be honest, I think that should kind of be every team's perspective.
Hmm.
And it seemed like in the case of Red Bull, like Max was just consistently better than Checo all season long. There were moments where Checo had his like victories and whatnot, but it was much more heavily favored towards Max. So of
Hmm.
course Red Bull is going to like give Max optimum strategies and whatnot, but they still did a pretty good job of like, if Checo earned it, giving it to him kind of thing. But at the same time, that didn't happen that often. So I do feel like teams kind of have to all come into the season, because like, what if one of your drivers just shits the bed? They like, their brain just like goes out the window and they just suck all of a sudden. Like, of course you're gonna have to like focus on the other driver more. But
Hmm.
if it goes the other way and the guy you're expecting to be your number one driver just like falls off, and your other guy, it just has like the best season of their career, like, it doesn't make sense, of course, to continue to prioritize the guy that you at the beginning of the season were like, yo, this is our
Yeah.
number one. Like,
Well,
that just looks
you
bad.
yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. But think about it from this perspective of like um resetting the expectations of the fans. So if decisions were being made right at the end of the season, let's just say for XYZ team to let driver A get the slipstream or do the quali move to give him the fastest lap. Like if these were decisions being made to set up for a certain kind of result at the end of a year, it would behoove the team to reset the expectations of the fans to say, "Hey, don't worry, that was last season. Going into this season, everybody's equal until points shake out and results happen." It seems like that's just more for like the the fans of the team and the public to understand like hard reset, new year, we're washing everything out and we're going into it fresh, we're all on the same footing. I'm not that mad at it. It does, like, I'm with you, it feels a little baked in. It feels like, yeah, duh, kind
Right.
yeah,
Well,
duh.
and with like with Alpine, like Ocon, I think it makes a little more sense for them than Ferrari, because obviously Ocon is the senior member of the team in terms of time spent with the team.
Yes.
So like
Yes.
I think it somewhat makes sense in, like you said, communicating that to the fans, to the people, about like, hey, we're like not gonna, like, Esteban's not just like having the run of the team. Like,
Yeah.
we think Pierre's a really good driver coming in his first year with the team, so like we're giving him a fair shake, of course.
Hmm.
Whereas like with Leclerc and Sainz coming in, it's, they've been head to head. We've seen how that panned out, and it panned out in Leclerc's favor. So I thought it was like the dynamics are interesting, especially with Leclerc. I think being like, yeah, like that's great. Like, I'm happy to be equals with him and like give priority to whoever's driving better, but like at some point we do have to like consider these championships because we didn't last year. Like,
Yeah.
like we didn't think about it, and I was friggin' on the edge of my seat till the last race of the season about if I was gonna even come in second in the drivers' championship after driving a phenomenal year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And having the car to probably could have won.
potentially, I think in terms of pace, yes. In
Yeah,
terms
that's
of
all I mean.
well, but like the car also like their reliability was just like
Sure.
rough. So I think that like the car at peak performance definitely rivaled the Red Bulls at peak performance. That just dropped off faster with the Ferrari.
Yeah. Yeah. So over the long game, yeah, the best
Yeah.
team clearly won. I guess I was just
It,
saying that their car definitely competed at a high
oh,
level that,
absolutely, yeah.
barring other things
Right.
happening,
Like
it was
I think if it was a new engine Red Bull versus new engine Ferrari for every single race of the season, it would have been a pretty tight championship.
yes.
So yeah, I totally get what you mean there, but
That's pretty like, zero analysis.
but I think that no, I think that is good analysis because it was like not close in either championship. Like the Red Bull, I mean, Max clinched in Japan, and then Red Bull clinched in what was it USA the next week
Mm-hmm.
for the constructors with like so Max clinched with 4 races left, and Red Bull clinched with 3 left. Like that's not a
Mm-hmm.
super tight championship. So I think it like I mean prime Red Bull versus prime Ferrari every single race I think does make that a very very tight championship. So I
Mm-hmm.
think I don't think it's that bland of a statement, but but yeah, I guess we also wanted to just briefly run through like highlights of the season. I don't know. I can kind of I had more of a short rundown, and then I know you wanted to talk about each of the drivers a little more individually. So
To be fair, I feel like a lot of our conversations have been like pretty in depth, pretty interesting. I don't like want to bore you with just like rehashes of like these things happened.
that's fair.
Yeah, we can just like hit highlights from the season. I'll toss in maybe some driver notes here and there, but yeah, yeah. After the conversations we've had, this stuff's boring.
Oh, I mean, I think that we'll find some interesting points in these two, I'm sure. My kind of year in review, I had highlights of kind of periods of time essentially throughout the season. So of course, like early on in the year, we had kind of an interesting start with Red Bull in particular, having come off the Drivers' Championship win for Max in 2021, to immediately go in and have these multiple DNFs at the beginning of the season.
Mm,
Max down nearly 50 points in the Drivers' Championship right off the bat. Red Bull, like big concerns about reliability, which they were really able to clear up. And then, of course, um, someone who impressed throughout the year, but George Russell in his first year with Mercedes full time, fourth in the drivers' championship, not too far off of Checo or Leclerc. Really, only 30 points off of Checo, 33 off Leclerc at the end of the season. So I mean, we had just a ridiculous streak of amazing performance from him, top 5 finishes, like really getting the most out of the car. And as we mentioned the other week, Mercedes throughout the year had one. I guess it wouldn't even be a DNF due to reliability because Lewis's at the end of the season wasn't in Abu Dhabi wasn't a reliability. It was because of the contact with the bounce off the ground. So they had like a really consistent car throughout the year. Did they have one?
Well, I'm just thinking. I'm sorry. I'm gonna ask though. So, is that a mechanical failure? But wouldn't a mechanical failure be
Well,
a
yeah.
reliability issue, or would you rate it more as like a retirement due to racing incident?
So yeah, that's what I mean. More so,
Okay.
I like if I mechanical issue due to a racing incident, not due to the car being unreliable.
Right, like the engine failing or the
Right.
power or whatever it is. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I just wanted to. Yeah.
No, I got you. But yeah, so we have like George just putting in a ridiculous performance in a Mercedes car that obviously had its struggles. Lewis had a lot of struggles with it early on in the season, which we saw him kind of just going into test driver mode. He was like, knew very quickly that he's like, we are not going to be competing for this championship this year. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
I just need to fix the car. Which was like, it was very interesting to see because it was such a drastic switch from the Lewis Hamilton that we've seen for the last 8 years. I mean, not that you and I have seen, but that the F1 fandom has seen for the past like 8 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
So a pretty significant switch. Then, of course, we did end up getting Carlos Sainz's maiden win in the British Grand Prix. We saw some of Ferrari's strategy issues there with Leclerc kind of being sacrificed to the wind to get Carlos the priority pit and everything, and then the win. Which, of course, I personally still believe Ferrari could have ended up 1-2 in that race if they had just done the double stack on the pit and had Leclerc come in and Sainz come in. But Carlos may, if that had happened, Carlos may still not have his maiden victory. So,
Yes.
so we had his maiden victory. Then we had.
Before we get too far, I just wanted to ask a question about there were a couple races where drivers were making decisions after, the pit wall calls for new tires where, they come out, they have everything ready, but the drivers don't come in. And I got the idea. Is it illegal to do dummy pit stops?
No.
Like, so you can pull people out
Yep.
with no intention of ever coming in if you want to play that game. That is not illegal.
Yeah, so it happened a few times in 2021 and 2020, which I think, and it periodically was like mentioned here, but I don't think it happened much this year. So this being kind of your first second full year of like F1, but first year where I'd say you're like really pretty well informed, and like I'd say where both of us are like pretty knowledgeable about what's going on. This was like, of course, the year that didn't happen much, but there were times last year where Mercedes would like be fucking with Red Bull, particularly in cases of like, oh, who's gonna undercut who, or like, oh, we think the undercut's good here. Is like, are Mercedes gonna pit early and like try and beat the undercut, and then like Red Bull either has to react or go long. Like they 100%, there were times that they like send people out to the pit box for the team with tires and everything, and then they're just like, and Lewis just continues down the pit straight and everything, and And also that's 100% fine to do. Teams do it. But it wasn't as like prominent this year as I feel like I've seen in past years.
Gotcha. Okay, so I was not wrong because there were a couple of highlights that I saw that I was like, he had no intention of ever going in. Yeah.
But in that instance, I do remember specifically like that was there's like a safety car and Leclerc being or like there's a yellow flag or whatever and Leclerc being like, do I need to come in? And his pit wall's like, we'll come back to you. And then they're like box after he's already passed like the pit entry.
Yes.
So it wasn't like in the instances that they made bad strategy, I don't believe that any of those were caused by like other people faking them out.
Sure. I just didn't want to get too far away from the early races because that's where I thought I was seeing it. So I didn't want to get like into
which is
the
kind
mid
of
and the late
likely.
Season.
No, I think that's honestly probably pretty likely because it had been common in previous seasons. But I think this year, to some extent, teams kind of figured out. It seemed almost like they could tell a little bit easier whether their car was going to like have a good or bad weekend. And so they had just a better general idea. I don't think it was competitive or quite close enough where those dummy pit stops start coming out to like play a strategy aspect of the racing and all.
Where actually like buying a lap like ends up being the difference between, a big result or a bad result.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
and so kind of moving into the middle of the season a bit, we had
and then what about Carlos Sainz just like sliding across the track in Australia? That was terrifying. And if I remember correctly, that happened a couple more times throughout the season where you were just like clenching your butthole like, oh man, he almost got tagged up.
Japan, I think, was the other one where he
that's right.
It was crazy rainy. He binned it and like there were cars like full speed flying past and like you're just like on freaking sitting on pin cushions like, oh my god, like this is scary.
Crazy. So yeah, just some dangerous stuff going on. There were 6 DNFs in Saudi Arabia, like a lot of like reliability stuff going on early. So it was kind of a wonder any of these cars finished. But yeah, then going into the mid season there.
Yeah, well, and Max just for a while, I mean, he won in the first 6 races, he won all 4 of the ones that he finished, and that was kind of the point that you're just, I think a lot of people were like, oh shit, like he is just on a tear, ready to kind of take hold of this drivers' championship. He took the lead back, I believe, right around that point. I mean, he won, like it was just absurd how well he was doing to some extent. It was just kind of crazy. And getting big wins, but of course one of the other highlights of that kind of earlier season in Italy with Lando Norris getting that podium. Like I had said on the last episode, we only had one driver who was not in Mercedes, Red Bull, or Ferrari make the podium, and that's the boy Lando Norris. Awesome drive from him in that race to take advantage of the opportunity. So that was definitely a highlight.
Well, and then for Lando Norris as well, he was the only one to take fastest laps off of the top 6 as well, which I thought was pretty interesting.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's the only one outside of the top 6, which is just like kind of crazy because I don't think only really many weekends.
Only one to get points doing it, or because I feel like I remember sometime where like Zhou Guan Yu like tried to take a fastest lap at least, but he was outside of the points.
No, you're right. Japan, he scored the fastest lap, but he ended up P16, so he took the
Yeah,
fastest lap point away from whoever. So you're right. Yeah, that stat
but
does not hold up.
no, but
I missed that F.
to be the only one who actually like got the fastest lap point outside of those guys also,
Hmm.
because Zhou didn't get the fastest lap point because he wasn't in the points.
Hmm.
So it still holds mostly true.
To a certain degree. But yeah, just to say that Lando had a pretty astounding career in what ended up being like not an astounding McLaren, to be
Yeah,
fair.
no, he had an awesome year. And I mean, like we were talking about, finished seventh by a wide margin, ahead of eighth place, just behind the six members of the top three teams. Put in just a awesome drive throughout the season. So that was a big highlight, but Red Bull just kind of surged throughout that middle of the season. Max, of course, getting 15 out of 23 race wins is obviously going to be pretty Red Bull dominant. But Checo got
Hmm.
some wins and really good performances in there as well. There's
Yeah, the
Monaco,
dub
which of
in.
course has the slight tint on it about the iffiness of if he binned it intentionally in quali, but either way, put in a great drive on race day, and everything to get that win, which is Monaco's just like a classic win, and just consistently on the podium kind of throughout the season. Um,
Doesn't
check
legend have it that Mick Schumacher put it in the wall on purpose at one point there?
Possibly,
I think so. So maybe we've got a
or
world champion on our
Michael.
hands. Oh, who did I say?
You said
Mick.
Mick, yeah,
Oh,
but
yeah, I meant I.
But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah. No, it like I was thinking what you were thinking,
Like,
but then I was like,
hmm.
wait, that doesn't sound quite right.
Right.
But yeah, no, Michael did also have a moment of intentionally binning it, but that was I think
Viable strategy.
I mean I guess it is, but Checo was not in first place in the in the drivers championship, so I think it's
I just wanted to see what it felt like.
he just wanted that Monaco dub. He wanted to jump.
Hmm.
He wanted to dive in the pool.
Fair enough, dude. I mean, Iron Man did it. Or he
Definitely.
tried.
Well, yeah.
It's my favorite joke from the year, by the way. Of
Really?
all the memes, that's my favorite one because it's just really dumb.
Ah, why is it
Just like
dumb?
harkening back to a movie scene
Yeah,
that, like, whatever. I think it's funny.
I
Anyway, we
think
were
it's
talking
funny
about
too.
Sergio Perez. So he won in Monaco, he won in Singapore. I think he was and continues to be the best like second driver that we've seen from Red Bull.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know they've had some like up and down kind of performances with some of the second drivers that they've had, but yeah, I think it's like he's the best one since Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel when they were on the team together. Like the lineup hasn't been as close for Red Bull since then. It seems like.
Yeah, the only other time I would say is really like Max's or the last year of the Ricardo Verstappen lineup, because they were pretty competitive with Daniel being a like a good, well established driver and Max being a good like up and coming driver and kind of competing for that.
Hmm.
But those really are the only two last like in recent memory. And even now, this year with Checo, like I still think those driver lineups were more individually competitive with each other than this was with Checo and Max. But
Hmm.
definitely between the shift from Ricardo and Max to Max and Pierre, and then Max and Albon and everything,
Hmm.
it was a little stint there that was there was definitely a gap, and I think it was smart for Red Bull to go to kind of the alternative option of not any longer looking for, hey, who is the up and coming driver that we can put next to Max, because that definitely I think was tough for Pierre and for Alex Albon, because going up against not only someone who is like around your age and young, but who is like a just phenomenon as a driver, like that's gonna crush a young driver's like
For sure.
mental. We talked about earlier, like your biggest competition is the guy next to you in the garage. Like to have someone like Max Verstappen as your teammate, as opposed to where bringing in Checo, you have someone who is a veteran driver. Checo's been driving for quite some time now, and has had like a pretty decently successful career up until coming in Red Bull, but especially just like consistent. And so he has that mentality. He's driven with a number of drivers. He can come into a team with this superstar and like still drive well and not be kind of deterred by thoughts of like comparing yourself to that guy. He's like, I just have to. He's like, I know I'm good. I've proved I'm good for years and years now. Now I just have to prove it in this car week after week. And like it's the same mindset as any other team he's been in, where these other guys are like, I got to prove myself, and the guy that I have to use to prove myself against is just like stomping me into the ground.
Yeah, that's no fun. And Sergio Perez, he's got to do it with or without a water bottle. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of continue throughout the season. Red Bull surging with the wins from Max and Checo. Lewis had a couple of different tears in terms of podium performances throughout the season. We had 5 in a row from Canada up through Hungary. We had the end of the season where we saw him in 3 of the last 4 races make the podium with 3 second place finishes. So like he really turned around his season after kind of being that test driver and all. And we saw him come back to be the driven, competitive Lewis that we've come to know, which was exciting, because I think that leading into next year with the continued development of these cars and everything, more minimal regulation changes, if any. Next year is going to be fun from the get-go with, I think, a 3-team competition up front. Of course, then getting to Japan, which we've talked about, Max had the very odd driver's title win where he clinched the driver's championship but had no idea because of the penalty to Leclerc, some of the inconsistencies we saw with the FIA throughout the season. But then that just carried the rest of the season into the kind of tight battle between Leclerc and Perez for the second in that driver's championship. So we it was, I don't know if it's the best, like obviously it's hard to compare to 2021 with how competitive the drivers championship and the fight back and forth between Mercedes and Red Bull and Lewis and Max was, but overall like I looking back did really enjoy this season and felt like it was it has a lot of good highlights of drivers, particularly with drivers who are kind of making their mark a little bit. Carlos Sainz with his maiden victory, and a really great drive. Same with George as well. Just some awesome performances. George getting the kind of full weekend win with the Brazil Grand Prix, getting that win in the sprint race and then going and getting it in the race as well was just super impressive. And I think that we're kind of expecting a lot sooner than the penultimate race of the season,
Mm-hmm.
based on what we had seen from Mercedes and what we had seen from George. I think everyone, including George, was like, "Oh, I am ready to go for the season, ready to get some wins, my own constructors championship, my own drivers championship," and it took longer, but yeah, definitely a big win. So those were kind of my big highlights throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think those are all pretty good. These were kind of the storylines that we were following throughout the year as well. I just want to go back to Miami. That's like still in the early season, but I thought that was an interesting kind of point where we have a new track introduced. Overall, I don't think it was like the best race or whatever. It's just interesting. I just use that to make this point of the audience in America growing significantly more, having more of a reach to this side of the pond, and with the addition of these, the new U.S. Grand Prix, it's just kind of like reflective of that interest. So I think, as a highlight for 2022, it's the kind of growing interest from over here. But yeah, overall, I think we hit a lot of good points. Now, because I have mine, I want to ask you, who is your driver to watch for next year? Who are you going to keep your eye on, kind of outside of maybe expected
Hmm.
main characters?
Ooh, that's. I mean, I think the obvious one is going to be Lando Norris. Like
Hmm.
it does really, for me, depend a ton about how the car is and everything. Whether he's able to compete for any of these race wins and everything. I Unfortunately, the 1-2 that they got in 2021, I think, was less due to the pace of the car and more due to other incidents that happened and them being ready to take advantage of the opportunity.
Hmm.
So I do hope that Lando gets a car in the coming year that he's able to really be competitive in, because I think he is one of my top rated drivers on the grid. I think he, in equal machinery, may have the upper hand on like Carlos Sainz, Checo. Like I think he does have that in him. So he is a big one, of course. I'm very interested also to see how Nico Hulkenberg does coming back into F1, because obviously he's been out. He had some consistently solid performances. I was, of course, like vouching for him, I think, 2 years ago as a
Hmm.
potential option for Red Bull, before Checo was signed and all. And I was like, 2 years out of F1 with only the occasional celebrity shot performance into a race is a lot harder to compare than like me being like, oh, he's only been like out for 1 year, maybe he should come back, kind of
Hmm.
thing. So that definitely interests me. And I think one of the other big ones for me is really Zhou Guanyu, because as a rookie this year, I think it's similar to like how I looked at Yuki coming into this season. Yuki, we saw a lot of growth, a lot of performance and consistency, like changes that were solid improvements for Yuki. I think the car that AlphaTauri had this year was not didn't have the highs that the car did in 2021, but the consistency that we saw out of Yuki was like the improvement that I wanted to see. And with Zhou, I think he had some similar like hiccups and whatnot going into the season. I think it was Monaco where he went full on through the one chicane because he locked up and said he might need a new pair of pants after that incident. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I would love to continue to see him grow in his drive because I think he had some really solid performances in the season, but they as a rookie he kind of did get overshadowed because he wasn't in that high competition for
Mm-hmm.
points all the time. So
Sure.
so I guess those
Yeah,
are
and
my top ones.
he was my driver to watch as well, and for a lot of those similar reasons. I definitely agree. I definitely agree on the Lando points. Yeah, I think you're right. In similar machinery, he could take drives off of any of them. So yeah, that's a good point to make. I think Gio. Um, Given, like, let's say Alfa Romeo is able to make some improvements going into next year, maybe their development plan is a little stronger. Yeah, I think we'll see Joe continue to grow and likely become a formidable force on the grid. And I'd be interested to see. He's likely one of the drivers that will have a chance to move up through the grid maybe in the next coming years and get a seat on a stronger team. I think would be, possible for what he's been able to accomplish in the year.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. And it I guess we'll just have to wait and see what drives
Yeah, for
open
sure.
up. It's a year after year thing, but that definitely is not something that I would say is out of the possibilities either. So
Yeah. So yeah, overall, I think it was a pretty good year. I made the point last week saying it was kind of like a victory lap for Max, but looking at the like kind of beginning of the season, yeah, they were able to really level up and just go on a tear at a certain point, but it wasn't a victory lap like right from the start.
no,
So I think I
definitely.
gave him a little too much credit on that end, but yeah, there were some struggles at the start, but yeah, overall, I think it was a fun year, a lot of good great storylines, a lot of, I would say, compelling things to look forward to for next year, where we have like some veteran drivers out, some teams switch up, some drivers in different seats. So we'll see.
Couple of
We'll
rookies
see.
coming in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another great point. So I think the complexion of the grid is going to change significantly into next year, and I'm just kind of looking forward to see how the races go.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
am definitely with you, and I'm sure we'll have other like tidbits of F1 to talk about. But it was fun like looking back at the season because it the season is so long. It's kind
Hmm.
of like and it's so different from other sports. Like with baseball has a very long season, but they also play 162 games. So, like,
Hmm.
yes, there's always going to be stretches and streaks of wins, of losses, things like that that teams have in that. Or like with basketball, hockey, soccer, even like those are things that do just kind of happen because there's more quantity.
Hmm.
Whereas with F1, like you're looking at this and there are kind of different segmented periods. There's that initial, like, teams are figuring things out, and George was putting in good drives in a Mercedes car that hadn't figured out an identity. Like, Max is winning every race that he finishes.
Hmm.
Like Leclerc and Sainz are like have great pace in the Ferrari, and there's like these shifts throughout the year that you can see more significantly because there are these like week to week or week to 2 weeks or 3 week gaps in between races, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, no, that's a great point to to be aware that sometimes the season looks very different when you're in it than when you look back on it.
Yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
especially when there's this long time. But
Hmm.
I think that was does that wrap up our F1 notes for this week?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So just some brief League of Legends stuff, looking at rosters and whatnot. Obviously, we talked about 100 Thieves last week. That has a lot of changes that are yet to be confirmed.
Hmm.
Some other changes and things that are going on. So Jensen has decided to leave Cloud9. Whether that was a team decision, his decision, they just put out a thank you, Jensen, and best of luck with your next chapter kind of thing. And
Gotcha.
they, as of right now, are going to be going with Diplex, who was a Academy EMEA player for Vitality B
Okay.
for the last little bit. And so, young up and coming mid laner that they'll be bringing in for this coming spring split, a 19-year-old. Yeah, coming from the EMEA over in Europe. So we'll be looking at how that goes. CLG, which I am very happy to see, they decided to run it back with their roster from this past year, and
Hmm.
I'm definitely happy to see that because they, I think, had a much more successful year than we had seen CLG have in quite some time. They were kind of battling in that midfield, middle of the pack area where they had been like at a, oh, are they gonna lose every game this season point for the past couple of years. So
Hmm.
it was nice to see them go ahead and just announce that they were moving forward with their full lineup from this past year.
Yeah, because you always want to see, what a team can do after they've learned a little bit about each other. They've grown as a unit, have, learned, improved communication and just all of these things that we talk about all the time where maybe immediate changes aren't always the best thing. Maybe kinks can be worked out and you can make the metal stronger in that way. So yeah, I think that's a great choice from CLG. I think their core of players was strong. So yeah, great move.
Yeah, I am definitely with you. Those were kind of the biggest like notes that I had other than evil geniuses. Well, and so Team Liquid hasn't announced like everything yet, but they, of course, have Bjergsen, Santorin, Hans Sama, who are all leaving.
Hmm.
So that have kind of been announced that they won't be a part of the team. So evil geniuses, we have some confirmed things. So Impact, who has now left and is a free agent, and they're bringing in Someday from 100 Thieves, since 100 Thieves is going with this roster, at least that we've heard of Bjergsen, Doublelift, Boosie, and Tenacity, I believe, in the top lane. So Someday found a home in a very good Evil Geniuses squad, who I think that with his experience and everything is a very logical like replacement for Impact. Who I think they have a lot of similar qualities, but that Someday has just had some stronger carry performances in recent memory, and all. And then bringing in FBI as well, who was on 100 Thieves. It looks like he's going to be their primary bot laner
Okay.
over Danny and Cowrie, who
Hmm.
played for them in the World Championships.
Wow, that's interesting. I was thinking that they would have given Cowrie the starting slot and like
So
moved Danny down,
So Danny and
but
Cowrie are both listed on the rosters, but
sure.
FBI is now also contracted under Evil Geniuses, so it's not a guarantee, I guess, that he'll be the starting bot laner, but he's definitely in the mix.
Yeah, and I'm
And,
I don't know enough. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it also like it does to some extent make sense. Like I thought Kaori like performed really well at Worlds, but getting a slightly more veteran player, FBI has been around for 4 seasons maybe now, I think. And if your concern is Danny going to be able to play because of course his mental health issues that have kind of taken him out of the game and out of the starting lineup, at least for Worlds this past year. If you're looking for, I'd say, a similar player that was available in NA, FBI is probably a relatively close like match to Danny.
Well, I think he's an upgrade. Especially like if he doesn't have the stage fear, like
that's the only thing that I necessarily see as an upgrade from FBI. I think they're both like in terms of like play side by side, pretty like similar quality. But that's what I mean. Like if you're gonna have a guy who is that similar quality, who is also Worlds. Gonna be able to play on that main stage without issue, then it's good to at least have that in your pocket to be like, hey, if Danny is not able to get himself in a position to play and everything, then hey, we have this guy who's ready and plays a similar play style and all. So
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, those were kind of the big notes that I had for LCS as of thus far. But I'm not sure if you had anything else before we move along to some Magic the Gathering.
The only and I'm pretty sure I've said this once before, but it's nice to see esports kind of going the way of using the tools available, where there was kind of a period where good like support staff and good coaches really weren't available. You kind of had to like reach into other areas and other sports to try and find these professionals. But as we're looking at these rosters and seeing individuals move around from team to team and like region to region, it's fun to see. And like,
and coaches too, like,
well, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Is and ultimately I think it's heartening to see it where we're using the talent, the industry is using the talent that they've grown and putting them in the coaching positions. Like the one that I saw today, Nagne, player from a couple years ago, you know, has moved positions, and it's good to see that they are, to be fair, just as a person that you once knew, it's nice to see that they're gainfully employed and still around. But just from like the growth of an industry perspective, it's like, yes, use the talent that you had, use that knowledge base, use that experience to, you know, improve the squads that you're working with now. And he was just a name among many that we've seen step into these analyst, coach, and, you know, support staff roles to still get at that goal of competition and winning, even though, you know, even if their hands aren't as quick as they used to be, you can still put that work to use.
Definitely. And like Freeze, another one of those guys. Freeze is who was the bot laner AD carry for, I believe, Alliance, H2K. He had a number of years over in the EU LCS before it was LEC. Is going to be the head coach for Evil Geniuses this season. So yeah, I think it's cool seeing us get to a point where veterans are now becoming coaches and taking those roles, where, like you said, we had TSM bringing in people like Weldon, and not to like knock Weldon, he had like great years with TSM as a head coach, but he was like a I forget what his exact job was, but it was like athlete psychologist or something like that initially that had come into like a coaching role because he had this mindset on, oh, I see this in esports and I think that my skill set fits, as opposed to people who have been like, I've been a player, I know what it's like, I know what this grind is like I can relate to you and have that mentorship as a coach that like from experience more so
Yeah.
than like trying to relate what you're going through to something different. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, definitely an exciting thing to see, and still a lot of rosters to be solidified, especially in the LCS going into next season.
Yeah. And we'll talk about some we'll talk about roster news as we get it, but everything isn't shored up. So just some notes here for this evening, but just some small magic sprinklings here. Mainly I just want to talk about helping out Buddha with a deck list of his. He's had a goal to upgrade one of his lists that he's had, and maybe take out some pieces that aren't as good and put in pieces that are better. So we spent a good amount of time over the weekend kind of going back and forth, looking over the list and talking about inclusions and what might be better, and like what's the main strategy. Like, is this really what you want to be doing? Is there like a better card like that has the same effect but's cheaper? Is this the deck that you put this in? These kind of things. And it was just really fun to work on somebody else's list, and also fun to like have the idea of, oh, here's one thing that I see, but I know his perspective on it too. Like, there was one card recommendation that I made, and his immediate response back was, "Oof, period. Yeah, maybe you're right." So like you can present like a novel perspective on it in a way that he sees like, eh, I heard the wolf as like a, like hitting him like bricks, where it's like, yeah, as much as I love that card, or as much as it's
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 like,
this, that, or the
fuck, like
third,
how did I
it's like,
miss
yes,
that?
that is the one. You're right. So it was just fun to have those conversations where it's like, it wasn't necessarily my idea or whatever, but it's just like you make the
Well,
suggestion and he sees like, yeah, that's more in line with what I'm thinking.
but that's
So it's just fun to
also,
do that collaboration.
yeah, and it's also cool like on me and the other listeners side to see that from your perspective and all, because like you've talked about a number of times where you've like been tinkering with your decks and whatever and have gotten input from your buddies on the deck list and on cards and things and that you could shift around or change or upgrade, and like it's kind of neat to see, or just even to hear about you being on the other side of it, where like you are now at a point, and like you could have been at that point for a bit, but you're now at a point where like you've gotten asked to like give input and kind of help someone while they're tinkering, and have
Hmm.
had like valuable input, which I think is cool. And I've seen it with like your growth from learning magic early on to now this point where you are like someone on that same playing field that you're like, oh yeah, I can dish out the advice too and give my thoughts. So that's pretty cool to see, and I'm sure like I don't know if you thought about it that way, but I think it's cool to see you taking all that knowledge that you've gained from the passion you have for magic, and putting that to use for for one of your buddies. So
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I don't know if I'd seen it from that perspective, but yeah, just like not not having as many games or not like looking at as many deck lists as I have, I wouldn't like you're right, I wouldn't have that like maybe interesting perspective or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a valuable thing where, you know, experience just kind of breeds creativity in that way. So I'm looking forward to see the deck list in its new form. Because he had ordered a bunch of cards and he was just looking, you know, to figure out what the swaps were. So I'm
nice.
looking to see the deck in the new iteration, and I'll
Maybe
likely
get
be paying
some.
the one for that Ristic study because that was
eh,
one of the considerations where he's like, you know, I have one of these. It should be in my most competitive deck. So I'll have to be paying a Ristic study here very soon, but you know, whatever, it'll be in the spirit of competition, which we love.
Hey, now you'll get some even more competitive games in with the Michigan gang. So that's definitely cool.
That is for sure. So yeah, just wanted to highlight some deck building fun that we were having over the weekend. But yeah, this one's running a little long there, sir. Why don't you give me your flavor of the week here?
Sure, I'll keep it short and sweet. So for my food this week, I know I mentioned it last week, but we had the hot sauce competition this weekend with
Yes.
Colleen's family. Lots of good hot sauces. I appreciated since I had been having some stomach issues. Everyone, for whatever reason, I think last year was just a little brutal on everyone. We did the Pocky Chip Challenge and some like really nasty hot sauces that were just
Yeah.
not fun. Everyone kind of went for more flavorful and different hot sauces, still with some kick, but definitely ones that I think we only had one that had Carolina Reaper in it, as
Gotcha.
opposed to last year where it was like almost everyone was like this
Hmm.
crazy hot sauce. But the most flavorful was a pickle hot sauce, which was interesting. It had like this like pickle flavor tang mixed in with the peppers and everything. And so I
Really?
think it was like habaneros or something with it seemed like it would be like banging for like a spicy chicken sandwich.
Okay.
Since most places that do chicken sandwiches throw those pickles on there, I was like,
Hmm.
that kind of fits.
There you go.
So yeah, it was
That sounds great.
there's this pickle hot sauce for my music. Spotify Wrapped just came out today for the year, and so my top artist was Mac Miller once again. So I haven't grown no, but I had Mac Miller, Kendrick Lamar, and a couple of different EDM artists in my top 5 artists that they had, which was cool. So I still have my long-standing favorites, but then I had a little bit of a new up and coming genre that I've been not up and coming, but more for me, like a
Sure.
genre that I'm newly enjoying since Colleen and I started dating. Kind of come into my main music, and then for my visual medium, I would definitely recommend it. We're still working our way through it, but Wednesday Adams on Netflix is a pretty interesting show. It's been enjoyable thus far. Definitely PG, so don't expect anything crazy. But it's in that Adams Family vein, which I've seen some of the old stuff, and it's kind of neat seeing that come back around. And it's definitely been an enjoyable watch thus far. It's I think well made, pretty clever, and there's some nice twists to it. So we've enjoyed watching that for the first few episodes.
It's funny you say that. That's what Sarah had on today, and from what I'd seen, I definitely enjoyed what I was watching. I got a little bit glued to the seat. I was like, oh, I'm kind of into this.
It's like
The
definitely
writing for her character is like really fucking
it's like sharp, witty, like it.
yeah.
I enjoy it, and
She's fun.
I think it's it could easily be overlooked because it is PG pretty much, which makes it seem kind of occasionally cheesy. But like also looking at the Addams Family, it was never this like gruesome, like really it was like a well written, like intriguing kind of show,
Yeah.
which this show also I would say fits that bill. So
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Surprising that it's Tim Burton directing it.
yeah.
It felt like there may be like some other creative input going on or whatever, but then you're right, and you do raise this point. If it is PG, it is live action. Obviously, you don't have as many like rated R kind of gives you a freedom, right? You can kind of, whatever. So yeah, that is an element that I didn't think of. So yeah, some of my maybe initial
I don't know if that's the
reactions.
exact rating, but that's the vibe that I at least get
Yes.
watching it. So
And I didn't even think of that angle. So yeah, I'm gonna have a different mind when I watch it next time. So yeah, thank you for that.
But
My visual medium here for the week, we're going back because I hate everything new. I'm just so jaded. 24 season 1, Jack Bauer. It was
I
and
never watched it.
well, I'll say this. I never watched it either. My mom was a big fan of it, and there were a couple later seasons that I watched that I remember really fucking enjoying. So I was kind of like, let's go back. Maybe let's get some of that lore and see like, what the Jack
Okay.
Bauer thing's all about. So we're, a decent way into season 1, and it is interesting. There are elements now that I know more about film and TV, and I'm a little more like in tune with what I'm watching.
Okay.
There are some things that are just like blatant where I'm just like, wait, this was a show about phone calls the whole time? Where like in my mind the imagery was different, but when you actually like look at what's on screen, like, oh no, these are just phone calls. These are just like intensely musicked phone calls. It's hilarious. So very excited to continue 24.
Nice.
My food here for the week, shrimp ramen. Sarah hooked it up. So Tuesday night, we were playing some Commander games, and it was a late night. Sarah asked me if she wanted me to if I wanted her to fix something up for me when I came home. Normally that's not like a thing, but yeah, I was like, yeah, that'd be great. So she hooked up some ramen that was like, it wasn't like the Maruchan ramen. It wasn't like the 25-cent ramen. She probably paid like 50 cents for the ramen.
Nice,
And then
nice.
she just like cut up a bunch of like veggies. She made some bacon. She threw like
Ooh,
cashews in there.
sounds awesome.
So like she really hooked it up. And that was really great. So I'm looking forward to hopefully doing that again. And then my music here for the week, just a really, really funny ad this morning, listening to the radio, driving into the class. I just enjoying some classic rock. And all of a sudden, I was being prompted by this ad talking about a widower architect going to a town where
Is this a Hallmark movie?
Yes, but it sounded like a bit. And
Wait,
like,
it's actually a Hallmark movie?
yes.
Oh my god, I was joking.
Yes, it was a true ad for like a real movie that's like on Netflix that they actually made. But the character descriptions and the storyline, you were like, no way, really? And I swear to God, the end of the ad was like, of course the show's real, silly. We're dumb enough to make it. Or like something like that for the actual ad of the thing. It ends, somebody starts talking about dish detergent and like come down to Lowe's for your home improvement. And I'm just like, what did I just hear? What was that? And
that's amazing.
Rational brain starts ticking, and I was like, no, that was an ad for a movie. That was just a modern ad for a movie. This is what they think they have to do on the radio to get people to like tune into their thing. I was dying. I was like, that's insane.
Hilarious. I can't imagine a Hallmark movie getting like an actual ad.
I have to watch the movie now.
Oh, well, you'll have to fill us in on how it is.
Christmas at a Christmas Tree Farm is, I believe, the movie that was being advertised.
So I've seen all these like TikToks, this guy like had a whole skit that he continued to do where he's like pretending to be like a coked up producer, essentially, where he's like basically doing Mad Libs. He's like,
Gotcha.
give me a theme, and they're like, a woman who she goes back to her hometown during Christmas time, and they're like, give me an actor, Vin Diesel. So he's like, so Vin Diesel is a lumberjack in this small town, and he bumps into blah blah blah, who's blah blah blah, and like just like, yes. And we're gonna make a ton of money.
Like, dude, so that's so funny.
So it sounds like it's just funny because Hallmark movies are just so like, it's just the most ridiculous things, and that name, just like Christmas at a Christmas tree farm or whatever the fuck, it just sounds like such a Hallmark movie. I may have to, like, if you find it, let me know. I will watch it because I need to see this.
Dude, a widower architect, there is no better character, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was like a great start to my day, just like howling with laughter at this ad in the drive to the class. But that is my flavor of the week here. That is all I have for you, sir.
I would say that's also a great end to this episode. So you're capping your day with a architect widower. But as always, everyone, we appreciate you having fun with us, listening along to us, joking around, having a good time, talking about all the things that we do here on the Tall and Short of It. So, of course, check us out on Spotify, Google Podcasts. We're on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter at Tall and Short of 1, the number 1. And as always, we really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen and hang out with us.
Yes, just tell your friends. Every Thursday we release new episodes. Wednesday nights if you're paying attention. But we do this every week. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. We thank you so much for your time. This has been another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast. Peace out, everyone.
Later.